If Billy Joel would watch this, he'd no longer sing about honesty. It's Todd Friel, boing! And I with my levitational power. So if you're here today and you thought, I can't be forgiven, I'm too bad of a sinner, you don't know how good of a Savior Jesus is. No matter who you are, no matter what you have done, where sin did abound, grace abounds that much more. Hello, and welcome to a Flashback Friday on Wretched. My name is Todd Friel. I'm your host. The wretch the song refers to, honesty. It's hardly ever heard unless you are hearing the testimony of comedian Jeff Allen. For my money, Jeff Allen is one of the funniest men on the globe.
And I'm glad his voice changed. My oldest boy, who's 23, went through puberty in an hour. Hey, what's happening? How you doing? I was fine. I'm moving out. You know. My other kid just crackled for months. Hey, what's happening? What's going on? How you doing? What's up? What's happening? 6'2". How do you keep a straight face during that phase of development? Times he'd get mad at his brothers, we'd have farm animals showing up at our back porch. Standing in the hall, get out of my room! Dad, they're in my room, they're touching my stuff. Hey, quiet down, there's a goat on the porch asking about you. Oh, that's real funny, Dad. Hey. Why don't you put that one in your dumb show? Hey. So I did.
Not only is Jeff Allen exceedingly funny, did I mention he's also a Christian?
See, I believe teenagers are God's revenge on mankind. I think one day God was looking down over his creation and said, hey, let's see how they like it to create someone of their own image who denies their existence. Because I have perused the Bible cover to cover. It never mentions how old Satan was when he rejected God's authority. My guess, 16.
Give or take. I'm not sure, but there's a few commentaries that would back that up. Jeff Allen, a professional stand-up comedian who is also a Christian. Now, you and I have watched a much longer testimony of the salvation story of Jeff Allen in the past, but recently I stumbled onto the Cliff's Notes version, and once again, I thought it was so good, it was absolutely worth sharing.
And I'm a Christian. I view the world through the Bible. I wasn't always that way. 14 years old, my father told me there was no God. My father took the time to sit me down and explain his view of the metaphysics for me as a 14-year-old. And I believed him. And I was 31 years old when I crawled into Alcoholics Anonymous to get sober. I was an out-of-control alcoholic and drug addict, and I had 2 small children. And I was 2 years sober when my father asked me what the catalyst was that got me to stay sober. My father wrestled with alcohol his entire life and was never able to stay sober for any length of time. And I told him the truth. I beat my 6-month-old son in a crib. And when my wife sat on the end of the bed that night and fed my son, I realized he was crying, and I struck him because he was crying. When she fed him, I realized he got beat because he was hungry. And through all the cocaine and all the rum, and I believe God was there that night, and it broke my heart. I realized that what I had done, and nothing to that point in my life had shamed me to that level. Not the drunk tanks, not the DUIs, not the screaming jags, not the bar fights, none of the stuff that comes along with the life of an alcoholic shamed me to the point of that one single act. And I told my wife that night, if you don't take me to Alcoholics Anonymous, I won't go, and if I don't go, we can't be married anymore. And we were married less than a year. She takes me to Alcoholics Anonymous. They say, pray. I go to what? They go, find something in the universe bigger than yourself. It's not about you. And that started me on a journey through self-help. I read all of John Bradshaw's stuff, Melody Beattie's stuff on codependency. I went into New Age Buddhism. I went to all of it to find answers to questions that I just didn't have any answers. There were so many questions and no answers. because I'd find things. I don't know if anybody's been on a search like this, but it was just this, it's the way I can say it is you're in a desert, you're dying of thirst, and you come across something that has water in it, and you scoop your hand up and you bring it to your mouth, and your thirst is quenched for a little while, but then you're thirsty again. And then the water's gone. You don't know where it is, so then you go out and search for a little more of that. You just want, and it was just everything quenched something in me. And I didn't realize it till years later. It was a spiritual thirst that I had. I was dead inside. I was dead. There's a part of us that if we deny, it eventually shrivels up and dies. And you can't fill it with material. You just can't fill it with material. And I kept trying to explain this to my wife because we were drifting apart because I was constantly in my head trying to figure out these things. And I figured, I always thought if I could just get the right words, the right document, the right something in here, then it would all make sense to me, and then I could be like the people that I saw outside. I used to see people and I'd go, boy, they look happy and content and at peace. And I go, I wonder what their secret is. And then it would tell me in the meetings it was a higher power, if you had a higher power. And I go, what is that? And they go, well, it's whatever you want it to be. And I go, yeah, but I don't get that. If I'm making up a deity, that makes me delusional. I mean, it's great that you can come up with something that'll make you feel good about yourself, but then when reality hits, I mean, real life, when you like cancer or a loss of a child or a loss of a job or a loss of a home, and you're on your knees and you're begging for some kind of comfort and relief in the middle of all this stuff, and then your brain says, I made this up. It's not real. It doesn't exist. At what point, it's like people who set their alarm clock 5 minutes fast trying to fool themselves into being in a hurry in the morning. How many days are you running around before you go, I got 5 more minutes? If you can fool yourself into believing that God exists, God bless you. Didn't work for me. And understand this, if I'd gone into those meetings 26 years ago and somebody would have grabbed the first day in, put their arm around me and said, you need Jesus Christ, I'd have left AA and never came back.
Very, very, very transparent. We just learned 2 things from that clip. Number 1, Jeff Allen is not a postmodern. Go ahead, make up your own God. I think this is God. But then when the rubber hits the road and you need help from your box and it's not there, you realize that you've only been lying to yourself, which basically is what postmodernism is. Second, did you hear the confession of sins that he committed when he was married and had a small child? He actually confessed cocaine, alcohol, beating his own child in a crib. Now, do you need to confess all of your monstrously big sins that are hidden in your closet as you give your testimony? No, you don't have to, but I would say this: the more you are willing to disclose, the greater God looks when he goes about the business of saving you.
But I couldn't get it. And I'd ask these people, what do you do? What do you do? They go, do you pray? I go, why? Why? I did the serenity prayer. I did what I was told to do. 7, 8 years I went on this thing, and it just never made any sense. And I look at my wife and I go, I got it figured out. It's got to be material. It's got to be stuff. This is my life. I get stuff. We buy stuff. Get a bigger house. Whatever it is, it wears out. We take it to the landfill, and we get more stuff. It wears out. We take it to the landfill. And I'm looking at Tammy, going, if this is it, if this is life, this is happiness, if this is my purpose and point and meaning, I'm checking out. And Tammy looked at me and said, "You checked out years ago, pal. You haven't been here for years." She said, "I can't help you on this." I said, "But don't you ever wonder?" She said, "Wonder about what?" I go, "The point to being here. If Darwin's right and we're just blobs, we're just primordial ooze that somehow gasped ourselves into existence, then there is no point. Then it is grab all you can grab. But it didn't do anything for me. I look at the gerbil in my kids' room, and they would grab their sticks on one side of a crate, bring the sticks over to the other side. And when they got tired of that, they'd bring them back over to the other side, spin a wheel in there for entertainment. I look at Tammy, I go, that's our lives. It's just stuff. There has to be more. And she'd go, why not us? Why not us? You have 2 beautiful children. You have a wife who's trying to love you. Why not us? And I'd go, what if you get T-boned at a red light? Read the newspaper. She goes, you're just being morose. And I'm going, I'm not. It happens. If my entire self-worth is connected to anything here, it could go away tomorrow. I knew guys in LA that had sitcom deals and movie deals. They lost them. They offed themselves. So where does it come from? And all the questions. I haven't had a skeptic explain. Dawkins, none of them can explain this. Why do I wake up one day and all of a sudden everything is about the questions? Where do they come from? I never had a question in my life till I got sober.
I'm sorry. It's just that Jeff Allen tickles my funny bone, and yet his testimony, so transparent, so honest, so God-glorifying. Next on Wretched. Welcome to Gerulv, Ukraine, economically depressed, difficult weather, and a gospel drought until the Tomorrow Clubs showed up. Kids clubs meeting every week. Children hear the gospel. They memorize Bible verses. They get saved, and they bring the good news home to their parents. Would you like to sponsor your own Tomorrow Club? You can do that at tomorrowclubs.org/wretched.
Perhaps you don't share your faith because you fear getting tongue-tied, or you fear you won't know the answer to someone's question. Good news, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Take the Big Toe Challenge. Purchase 12 or 52 copies of our new evangelistic booklet, Don't Stub Your Toe, and simply leave a copy on the table when you leave the restaurant, or give it to the drive-thru attendant. It is just that easy. Take the Big Toe Challenge at wretched.org. Take a dollop of sarcasm, mix it with conservative theology, and voila, Wretched TV. Wretched, amazing grace, amazing gospel.
Welcome back to a Flashback Friday. If I said anything right now, it would simply be redundant or repetitious or kind of tedious. So take it away, skinny boy. Jeff Allen is a professional stand-up comedian and a Christian. You didn't think the two could go together, do you? This is what I like about Jeff Allen. I'm not sure, but I think I met Jeff before he got saved in a comedy club years ago. He, I think at that time, was battling drugs and alcohol. He had a bit of a buzz in that. Well, I mean, he probably had a bit of a buzz, but there was buzz in the comedy community. Hey, there's this guy, and he's flying in, and he's going to do some time tonight. He works in Vegas. This guy, Jeff Allen, back then, he was on the level of a Louis Anderson or a Jerry Seinfeld or an Ellen DeGeneres. He was supposed to become one of the big celebrities. Well, now, with hindsight, we realize why maybe that trajectory didn't take off. He was lost. I mean, this guy was lost. He just confessed to you and to anybody who would hear cocaine and alcohol, and he even beat his own child in a crib. This fellow was as lost as the rest of us. That's what he's just willing to admit. A lot of his sins, which is what makes a testimony so extraordinary. There are some people who I think go too far in their testimony. Well, on Tuesday, I was sleeping with 17 women, and on Wednesday, it was only 12. Enough with the details. No, let me tell you more. I was mainline and Drano. Okay, stop. Just stop. We don't need these sordid, lurid details, but the more we can share about how dirty we were, the more amazing salvation is when God cleanses us. Jeff Allen, extremely funny fellow, and what I really like about his style of comedy, it's not da-da-da-da-da-da-da, boom, da-da-da-da-da-da, boom. Instead, it's just storytelling about real life.
Found out our oldest, who's 20 years old now, found out he was hyperactive when the kindergarten called to tell us he was hyper. Like we didn't know. Is there a parent of a hyper kid here that gets a call? Your son's hyper. No! He's so calm at home. First day we dropped him off at kindergarten, it was all we could do to keep from laughing. Some perky woman came over. We'll have so much fun. I'm sure you will. We're gonna go pick up an answering machine. We'll see you later.
Kind of a Herman Munster shuffle to boot. The testimony of Jeff Allen. So far, we've heard how he went into a trough. He was devouring what the world had to offer, and all of it was sinful. And yet, the questions. What is the point?
I enjoyed going out and partying and drinking and doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden, that didn't work anymore. I'm beating my children. My father, in all of his wisdom, never sat me down at 14 and said, you know what, there's no God, but at some point you're going to want to know why there's no God, and then here's the answer. I just wanted to know, and I'd look at my wife and I went for something. She'd look at me for other things, and we just broke off. We filled out divorce papers, we had them notarized, and Bible says what Satan intends for evil, God will use for good. My biggest character flaw to this day is procrastination. I always said if I was a type A, we would have went to the paralegal, had the papers filled out, I would have been divorced in a week and a half. But as it worked out, I didn't do anything for a year and a half. Moped around and tried to figure something out, and God put a man in my life who put some Bible tapes in my hands from a tent in Denton, Texas, Tommy Nelson's church. And after about a year and a half, Tammy said, we were filing papers. We were 10 minutes from the courthouse to file those papers when she had a change of heart. If you don't think God will bring you to the edge in your life, guess again. We file those papers. We drive 10 more minutes and file those papers. I lose the last 18 years with a woman I never knew I could love like this. I lose 18 years raising my children. I lose the day my granddaughter's born 4 months ago. I lose that. I can't even tell you what went on in the last 18 years of all the losses I would have had if I just file those papers. First book I open up in the Bible is Ecclesiastes. I don't know if you're familiar with Ecclesiastes. I know, to me, it's the most honest book in the Bible. Solomon knew more about life in America 5,000 years ago than all of the pundits I've read since. Meaningless. It's all meaningless. That was the first verse in the Bible, a book. Vanity is King James. Meaningless. It's all meaningless. Everything. And my heart jumped when I heard that pastor say that. Meaningless. What's meaningless? All of it. Everything. Nothing outside, nothing of this earth will give you value. And I'm like, wow, wow. This is what I got out of that sermon. Life without God will have no meaning. Without meaning to your life, there's no purpose to your life. Without purpose, suicide. That summed up 8 years of my life in one 45-minute sermon. I thought if that's in the Bible, I got to get more of that. And I opened up all these envelopes that I had been collecting for a year and a half. And eventually I ran out of Ecclesiastes tapes, and I got to Genesis. And that was the verse that broke me. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I fell to my knees in the middle of my living room. And I said, there's a God, my God, there's a 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 God. And I called my buddy up who's been my friend now for a year and a half. And I said, Phil, there's a God. He goes, I've been trying to tell you for a year and a half. And I said, but I didn't know that. And he goes, what's your problem? I said, how about blasphemy? How about denying his existence? How about cursing him? For gosh sakes, I cursed him forever. And he said, why would he want me? Why would he want me? He said, have you gotten to the cross? I go, the cross? He goes, oh, I don't want to ruin the ending for you. Wow, what happened on the cross, I don't have time to get into, but I can tell you this, without the cross, if Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead, then Christianity is nothing more than another man-made feel-good organization like Kiwanis. But if he rose from the dead and everything he said was true, rising from the dead changes the whole equation. This is not the end. This is not the end. And what I realized at some point was what I wanted was an explanation of who God was. I wanted somebody to explain it to me so that I got it and I understood it and I believed. Truth was I needed a revelation. And that comes from God, and I can't control that. All I know is this, that one day it hit me, that there was a God, and I believe I was created. Every cell in my body was created, designed for a purpose. I may not know what that purpose is, but I do know that I got to get up, and I have to respect everybody outside of me, everybody. Every one of you is a God, creation of God, and I am to love you as Jesus loved the church. My job is to serve the best I can. Tammy laughed when I told her that because she knew how selfish and self-centered and arrogant I was, but my job is to serve. If you want to be loved, you have to be loving. You have to give it away. You want money, give it away. It doesn't belong to you anyway. All of it. everything outside Christianity is the only worldview where the strong is commanded to reach down and help the weak.
Why? Because that is exactly what our God did. Jeff Allen, from cocaine addict, alcoholic, child abuser, to one who desires to actually serve other people. Amazing testimony. Got a question for you. When you are asked for your testimony, and I hope you are on occasion, how much do you disclose? How transparent and honest are you? Perhaps a better question is, how open and revealing should we be about all them skeletons in our closet? Next on Wretched.
Take a dollop of sarcasm, mix it with conservative theology, and voila, Wretched TV. Wretched, amazing grace, amazing gospel.
What is the purpose of this here Wretched program? Well, one of our goals is that more and more people will hear the gospel, respond to the good news that Jesus died for sinners, repent and put their trust in the Savior, and then go about the business of sharing with others what God has done for them by sharing their testimony. If and you think that's a pretty nifty goal, and I suspect you do, would you please help us do that financially? Ongoing, monthly, tax-deductible support. We can't do this without you. It is our promise we will continue to focus on preaching the gospels, that people will be saved and God will be glorified. Would you please partner with us in that endeavor? Welcome to a Flashback Friday on Wretched. Got two questions for you. One, does anybody ever ask you, or do you ever ask anybody for their testimony? Question number two, how much dirty laundry are you willing to hang out on the line? If and you ever get together with Christians, might I suggest that you ask one another, tell me your conversion story. That is genuine fellowship. Getting together with a group of Christians to watch the big game, that's not fellowship. It's nice and it's fine. But fellowship is when our conversation centers around the atoning work of Jesus Christ. And doesn't a testimony hit the bullseye in that regard? If you want to have a sweet time together and glorify God together and rejoice together, let's be asking one another for our conversion stories. And when we do, question number two, might I suggest that we become increasingly comfortable with sharing uncomfortable details? You just heard Jeff Allen, public figure, famous guy, makes a living selling tickets to comedy shows, was willing to admit drugs, alcohol, that while he was drugged up, he thought about murdering his wife? Wow. Now, he was willing to share that much. How much are you willing to share? How much should you share? What are the rules? I would suggest to you there aren't rules, but there are a couple of principles. Number one, the more sin you're willing to disclose, the greater Jesus looks. The more of your filthy past that you are willing to confess to other people before Jesus saved you will make Jesus shine brighter. And so I think the principle is the more of the ugliness that we can share, the more beauty is seen in Jesus Christ's salvific work. Now, what does that look like? You need to decide that. Everybody's a little bit different. It could be where you're at, how near you are to those sins. If you're still working through them emotionally, I think you can take time, and nobody should be willing or able to tell you, you got to share this and you got to disclose that and you got to let people know that. You figure that out in your own time, but keeping in mind the principle of the more I'm willing to share about my sinful past, the more amazing salvation is. Wouldn't it be interesting if you and I were more willing to share with the world, perhaps when we're witnessing to them, what our lives look like before we got saved? Is it possible that might stave off some of the, well, you're just a bunch of religious, self-righteous Christian people, and you act like goody two-shoes? Oh, let me tell you, I'm the opposite of goody two-shoes. Before Jesus saved me, my life looked like this and like this and like that. If you and I are more willing to share those things appropriately, another principle, we don't need to be salacious. You should never get into the details in the particular acts. That's not necessary. That would probably actually be sinful. But the more we're willing to share in appropriate ways, perhaps the world would understand the cross better. And wouldn't that be worth it? Surprise! Next on Wretched.
She was probably going to have an abortion because her boyfriend was pressuring her. But she took with her a little baby bag that we gave every client. And when she got home, she told us that her boyfriend took out the little fetal model that we would put in each bag with all the little hands and the feet and the fingers, and he put it in his hand like this, and she said he looked at it and he looked at it, and finally he said, I don't think we should abort this baby.
What do altercations, arguments, bickering, disagreements, disputes, and fights have in common? They are all inevitable, and they are also avoidable. Conflict is our newest Wretched resource, designed to give you the tools and skills you need to fight biblically. That's right. Conflict will teach you how to fight biblically, which will make all of your other fights go away. If you're weary from the battles in your home, conflict. Wretched. Amazing grace.
Welcome back to a Flashback Friday and a Wretched surprise, a sermon sizzler from R.C. Sproul.
You know, it's easy for us to love God, to be grateful to God, and to worship God because of all of the wonderful things He's done in history and in our own history for ourselves. But I don't think the Christian rises to true worship until the Christian begins to worship God not for what He has done, but for who He is in His transcendent majesty. When we realize, as the theologians of the past have said, that God is the most perfect being.
Challenge accepted. Kind of threw it down. It's good to worship God, to thank Him for His many blessings. But according to Dr. R.C. Sproul, there's an even higher level when we aren't grateful just for the stuff that He gives to us, but that we are simply grateful for who He is. That's the mark we should be striving for. Let's see who won something, shall we? Congratulations to Larry Gonzalez. Reset for Parents. Larry now owns it for free. You could too. How? Simply subscribe to our free Wretched newsletter at wretched.org. And until tomorrow, go serve your King.
Thank you for tuning into Wretched, and thank you for your generous support. Your tax-deductible gift allows us to preach the amazing gospel. Wretched. Amazing grace.